Welcome to Stage Presence, presented by IndieBeat. I'm your host, Josh Pineda. This podcast is all about the artistry of music-minded people, those who have a defined vision in engaging their fan base, beyond just producing awesome music, but also through a more aesthetic and cultural process. In this show, I'll be talking with different creative types surrounding indie and alternative culture that I feel have that necessary stage presence. First, I want to thank one of our favorite featured artists here on IndieBeat, The Good Wives. They provided us with our fantastic theme song you just heard. It's called Keep It Coming from their upcoming debut LP, Robot Island, out in September. This is a great first episode with my friend and artist, Jess Mayuga, who I had an amazing conversation with about her take on indie and alternative culture. We also talk about what she has coming up. When we recorded this, she was days away from entering her first studio recording session. Jess also performed for us an acoustic version of her song, Bruised, so stay tuned for that at the end of the show. In terms of her music, she's a lo-fi rock-based solo artist. On IndieBeat, I previously described her songwriting as having a thoughtful wit, an incredible turn of phrase, all encapsulated within this sort of existential angst. Her honest temperament and her gracious strength reminds me a lot of Annie Clark, who you might know as St. Vincent, especially noting Jess's recent shift to adding more electric guitar elements into the mix, departing from her previous fully acoustic works. We started our conversation by me asking her about her Twitter bio, which I feel she captures herself best in. It currently reads, musician for the hollow-hearted, so I asked her to unpack that a bit.
Oh man, I think the musician for the hollow-hearted thing comes from basically just how I feel all the time. I think I write music for myself. I think when I write music, it's very much a reflection of how I'm feeling at any given moment. I could tell you what I was going through if you just, ask me what I was feeling when I was writing these songs. And I think the commonality between every song that I've written is that they were written at a time where I was feeling very hollow-hearted. And I think a lot of music nowadays is, or at least a lot of the music that I listen to, is music that has been written for people who have been feeling maybe too much. And I'm kind of the opposite of that. All of the music that I write is music that I've written when, I wasn't feeling enough. And so,
Interesting.
Yeah, I think it is what it is. All of the music that I've written has been written when I was feeling probably the most hollow.
So when you say hollow, are you talking about general numbness? Is there a hollowness that's disinterested, or is it a hollowness that's nostalgic, sad? Like, what kind of hollowness?
Well, I think I almost want to say that the hollowness is, let's see, I don't know, I can't, you got me with this question.
Hit you with those questions early on.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The hollowness isn't so much a numbness. It's not so much a depressive hollowness either. I think to me, hollowness is the opposite of feeling heavy.
That's really interesting. The opposite of feeling heavy. So you have this hollowness, and I think that's really interesting in the way that I think you perfectly described that. I mean, on Bummer Time, you called it the strange theme of bitterness that you don't know much about. But again, you say that that's not necessarily a reflection of yourself, but sort of just what comes across and what listeners might feel listening to your music. So I think that kind of captures what you're doing. But I'm also think there's a little tension in that because earlier in the year you wrote a piece for us, an encounter, and you wrote about never stop improving. You sort of took Lowe's slogan and adopted it. But now your Twitter name is now Depressica, and you're tagging your songs with Sad Girl on SoundCloud. So how would you describe your sound aesthetic in terms of how it sounds as compared to how it feels?
I think it's interesting that you mentioned my shift from the acoustic to electric guitar in my recent songs. Cause I think the electric guitar, for example, has the tendency to sound a lot more emotional. I guess in that sense, cause it's, a lot more abrasive and it's very in your face. But one of the reasons why I chose to switch from acoustic to electric guitar is that it takes so much less effort to get a sound out of an electric guitar. And so I don't have to put as much force into it as I would an acoustic, which I think is the opposite effect of what each instrument is supposed to kind of produce or contribute.
I think you're right. I think that the acoustic guitar really gets that, it's sort of the heartstrings, like literal heartstrings.
Mm-hmm.
And then the electric is more visceral, but it's more ambiguous in the way it sounds. So right. I think you hit the nail on the head on that. And I think that sense of evolution in your music also captures your evolution in your sort of thematic elements of your music.
Someone, very recently described my music as sounding like a high school girl's diary. And
I saw that on Twitter.
Yeah, for approximately 6 minutes I was very angry. Like, how could you reduce my writing to that of a high school girl? And then, 6 minutes later I realized there's nothing wrong with sounding like that, because I also feel I think especially women's emotionability is always so disregarded or devalued. So I'm very happy to also be representing the fragility of early 20-somethinghood.
Right. I wouldn't go as far to say, I think that is a little bit insulting, really, the high school girl's diary. Mm-hmm. Because I think the way that they might have thought about it might have been that backhanded sort of compliment.
Right.
Especially in the way that we interpret a high school girl's diary, we interpret it as really superficial. I feel like what he should have said, and if I interpret your music in sort of the same way that he does, is that it's honest and it's genuine, and you're not holding anything back, but you still are touching on that existential angst that I talked about. Mm-hmm. You're still talking about, it's sort of humanistic. It's very much about what it is to be feeling alive or not feeling alive, feeling sort of just floating around in your head. And I tend to relate too to your music. It's incredible.
Thank you. And I mean, I think to me, feeling alive is much more than I think what people think feeling alive means. I think my music is very much about feeling alive, but feeling alive isn't always, feeling happy.
Right.
Which is, I think, why I write the music that I do. I feel like in real life, I have such a chipper and, happy disposition. I generate positivity wherever I go. And I think, counter that by writing, I don't know, I guess the sad girl music that I do. Cause, being alive speaks to both sides of the spectrum.
Definitely. And I mean, I think we should talk about how we met, just to preface this a bit, because I don't know if you, do you want to tell the story? I think you might tell way more interestingly than I would.
Oh no, I want to hear how you want to, describe it.
Alright. So 4 years, so we went to the same university in Redlands, California, University of Redlands. And 4 years ago, I got accepted, and I posted my acceptance letter on Tumblr with the hashtag, University of Redlands. And I didn't expect anything from it. I mean, I used that personal blog just to post. I don't even have that big of a following on there. But, I got a message from you and you're like, oh, hey, I'm going to University of Redlands in the fall too. And I like your blog. I think you said I like your blog. I want to imagine you said you like my blog.
I imagine that I did say that. For the record, I do like your blog.
Alright, well, thank you very much. I appreciate yours too. But yeah, so I put that up, and then we slowly became internet friends. And we planned on meeting, but it never really happened. And then, 4 years later, a month before graduation, I'm leaving a grad review, and I'm running to go to another grad review. And, I just hear, oh my god, this is happening! And I see someone running at me, and I'm like, this is great. And you just vigorously shake my hand and you're like, nice to meet you. And then I just start cackling in front of this crowd. We probably scared that crowd away. And then we went on with our days. So yeah, that's sort of our friendship in a nutshell. So is that anything you think of it?
Oh, absolutely. I think our friendship is so fun, mostly because we've known each other for so long, but that's literally our only physical interaction.
Right, exactly.
That's great.
But I think that does contextualize a lot of what our relationship with this artistry, because I mean, we've done everything digitally, and I think that also translates into sort of the indie community now, that it's all, music scenes are not just physical, they're also amplified on the internet. And you sort of started that way with your music, correct? You started as a MySpace artist in like
Oh
the
my
mid
god,
to late 2000s.
absolutely. I miss MySpace so much.
MySpace was great. It was so simple. It's not as fragmented as it is now.
Right. Everything was so streamlined and you really only reached people who wanted to listen to your music. And it was great. It was so easy to produce music and get like feedback. And I think I really peaked in my MySpace days.
Oh, I think you've always had a great vision on your music, and I think you're always like reinventing yourself, but always sticking to a similar sound aesthetic, and just adding more elements. I think it's fantastic. I think I hate to go back to the same comparison of St. Vincent, but I think you do have a similar arc to hers. She started very much as a singer-songwriter, acoustically on her first album, and now she's like on this very alternative and very, complex sort of intelligentsia aspect of her music, and I think that captures your arc too. But I also think you do it with a little bit more of a genuineness. Not to say that she's not genuine, but I think you're so open with your music that I feel like it translates a little bit better.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, but what exactly do you miss about the MySpace era that's not captured in, like, say, Facebook, Twitter? As you know, IndieBeat is very interested in the way social media functions with artistry. So how would you say it's different now?
Well, I don't know, when I think about it, I think I miss MySpace being a platform for I think fans and listeners to engage with artists. Because I can, put out as much music as I want and share it on Facebook and Twitter, Tumblr, but on Facebook, when I'm, sharing links on like my own personal page, the people who I'm sharing it with, they aren't my listeners. They're just people who know me and people who happen to know that I do this thing on the side. But they're not actively like engaged in, the craft, which is, I think,
Right.
something that like Facebook fails to do that MySpace did really well, was that like it was just a platform to connect listeners with the artists. And, I still talk to, all the friends and musicians that I knew on MySpace back in the day. So like, yeah, we are very much connected that way, but I don't see any platforms that are able to do that now as well as MySpace did.
Right, that's a great way to capture that. I mean, yeah, I think Facebook, it's like you can't capture your whole fan base because they want you to pay into it. So it is very much like Facebook isn't really that receptive to music as they want to seem they are. I think MySpace, even the new MySpace that's out there, is way more receptive to engaging fans than anything out there right now. I think the closest that you might get is Twitter, only because you can have that conversational feel in 140 characters. But it's still not the same. I think it was just an easier setup. And yeah, I think it was easier for, more so than artists to engage their fans, to artists to engage other artists.
Right, absolutely.
IndieBeat recently talked to one of your MySpace friends, Nansha.
Oh my god, I love Nansha.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, no, actually, Shannon, Nansha,
Right.
we've known each other for almost 10 years now, and she maybe lives 45 minutes away from me, but she's also another person I've never met.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Common theme with you.
It's so true. Avoidance at its finest.
But yeah, so I think that sort of relationship aspect of MySpace is missing. And I think that's what sort of the blog scene is trying to do, especially since the blogosphere tries to like connect, IndieBeat's mission is to introduce fans with their next favorite artist. But I think it's also, we have a huge returning artist rate. And, I don't know about you, but do you go back and like go through blogs and that's how you find your new connections with artists and new connections with other fans?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that I do like occasionally. I wish I did more of it, but I really like engaging in that way.
So yeah, I think that's definitely missing, and that hopefully in the future we get something better with that. But I mean, there's a ton of other things to fix in the music industry, especially for indie artists. I mean, just the streaming rates.
That's true.
Yeah, so what's your opinion on that? I know I asked that a lot on IndieBeat, and I usually get the answer that it's a double-edged sword. Like, you sort of have to do it to put yourself out there, but you sort of can't complain either because as a music fan, you're sort of using that to find other artists as well.
Right. I mean, okay, so I like using Spotify. I take Spotify way too seriously. Like, I probably have almost 150, playlists that I've personally curated to fit whatever mood. But that's besides the point. Like, I just really like Spotify as a way to, I don't know, just take my music wherever, and that's how I'll find new artists sometimes using the whole, Discover Weekly thing. But I make a point to, look for, artists on Spotify who have, the 40 monthly listeners.
Right.
And then they'll also have their, album out on Bandcamp. And so it's fun, it's really easy to find artists that way. But I think it's only a useful tool if you're also supporting those artists outside of that platform. So, I'll buy your album on Bandcamp. Because that's, as an artist, I know that that's what you really want to happen.
Right.
But it's a very useful tool for sharing and being social. I wish that, Spotify would bring back that feature where you could listen in on someone else's listening session to make it even more social, or to be...
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, and, me as an artist, I can't access my artist page until I reach, I think, 200 subscribers, which is a bummer, because I'd really like those analytics. But not only that, I don't know who's listening to me. I don't know where they are. I don't know the breakdown by city, what songs they're listening to, etc., etc. Which sucks to me as an artist. Why can't I engage with my listeners when, they're out here somewhere in the world?
Yeah, I mean, those statistics really do help, not just as in connecting with fans, but also if you want to just continue marketing yourself to your audience. Like you said, you want to get people back to your Bandcamp page. You want people, if you play shows, to attend shows, buy merch. That's sort of a problem in, the indie universe, is that, I mean, if an indie artist's goal is to get signed, you sort of have to do the A&R yourself. You sort of have to grow yourself, and you have to do everything yourself before someone invests in you, but all the tools are rigged against you.
Yeah, because it's okay, so I had, at one point, maybe 13 listeners in Madrid. That's not much, but how did they find me in Madrid? I'd really like to know what their first point of contact with me was, and why they're still listening. It's a bummer that I don't have access to that information at all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand why, there's so many avenues that could help artists, and I mean, there's simple changes too. It's just re-engaging that feature for everyone. But again, it's sort of it's a cyclical sort of way to prevent new music to prosper, yet we're complaining that there's no great music out there.
Right, exactly. I think they're doing everything in their power to, I mean, in some way, shape, or form, artists are being helped by being able to, put their music on these platforms. But we're prevented from, I guess, gaining popularity or gaining a following because of the features that they lack. And I think it's very purposeful, the way that it's set up.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So off of that sort of gets me into my next question. So you're talking about this connection with fans across the world, not just in your area. I'm wondering, I think I've seen that you're invested in the Redlands and the San Bernardino music scene. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
There are a good amount of artists in the Inland Empire, and I'm very excited about it. I'm very excited to have, just the vaguest connection to them. I don't quite think our musical aesthetics align in any way, shape, or form. But I'm just excited to know that they exist and that there's a network of just artists out there who are out here supporting each other and just having a good time playing their shows. But I also really like going out to, the LA area to find indie bands. But I really, really love supporting tiny, very local music. It's just been very fun for me to see, my friends, out there.
So yeah, you said that they don't necessarily align to a specific genre, a specific movement, but that community aspect is still there. You've met these people, you you've talked about music, you play together, you show each other what you're working on. So what's that connection like? Are these shows in like hole in the wall places like cafes? I'm assuming they are, like, or like record shops.
Yeah, it's definitely mostly shows like that. One of my, I guess you can call them my friends, they're on tour right now, and they're from Redlands, and I went to their show in Santa Ana at this record store, and it was cool. I really liked it. I really like the people who go out to these shows, because they're also people who are just in it for the music and to have fun. And I think that's something that I'm missing out on, just because I don't really know any other artists who, at least I don't know any other artists in the area or around my popularity level that kind of, I guess, match my musical style. So it's very hard for me to like find community in that way. But I also just really like knowing that that community exists and that they're here for no one but each other. That was very corny, but it's true. I don't know. It's just really nice seeing that that community is very much alive.
You talk about how you watched their show in Santa Ana, which is in Orange County, and it's sort of outside the general area that you would consider a scene. Like, I mean, everyone knows that SoCal is a sprawling area. There's a specific type of community in Southern California that sort of, it's transient just because the nature of Southern California, and I think you really hit on that it's not necessarily like a direct person-to-person community, but do you sort of feel like that community extends throughout the Southland?
Oh, I think it extends like through the Southland and beyond. Just kind of like observing the way that like my friends' bands operate and seeing the like connections that they have to like other bands that I like that are sprawled out across the country. Like, it's pretty incredible to see like what networks can exist when you have like the support to let them exist.
That's another area of interest that we try to like highlight. This sort of network is sort of invisible. Again, with social media, it's sort of expanding upon each other, building upon it. But it is it's deterring in the sense of popularity, but I think it does also help build in terms of the relationships between artists and their fans.
Yeah, I think like once artists kind of, I don't know, I think there's a lot of, not even artists, but just like people in general, you know the whole like theory about social media following ratios.
Oh yes, definitely.
Yeah, I think like once that mindset kind of is abandoned or, kind of tweaked, I think those networks can probably exist way more prosperously.
I agree. I mean, social media kind of gets pigeonholed in this position that it's like this sort of bad thing and sort of this vain thing. But I think it all goes back to the way people are using it, because I think there is that sort of like people who care about their ratio and they want more followers than they are following, or they pay to get followers. But again, it's sort of, that's there to like build the community when it can't be a tactile thing. So I think that there's pockets of social media that do that. It's just about how do we get that to work on a grander scale.
You can't see it, but I'm nodding my head.
Okay, that was a rhetorical question, of course. I wasn't asking you. I mean, you could if you have the answer. I think everyone would want to know. But
Heavens, I have no answers.
Off of that, so we talked about the local scene, but I also want to get sort of the context. How did you start playing and writing music, and what was sort of your motivation?
Okay, so I think I probably wrote my first song when I was 4 years old on like this dinky electric keyboard that I had in my house that I got for Christmas from my grandma.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because I don't know, it always has just made sense to me. Like, I know that's not the way it is for everyone. I think there are like some people who are like, yes, I made a point to like write my first song at 13 and that's how I became like a songwriter. No, like for me, I think in poems or I think in verses, and like if it's almost an obsession to me. Like I'll just these things will just like pop into my head, and then I'll sit down and then put a tune to it, or the other way around. And it's always just been very intuitive. But I also, didn't start playing guitar until I was probably like 12. And I think that just like made the songwriting process easier for me. But in terms of like how I got started, it's just always kind of been a thing.
I think that's a more common answer than I think people want to envision themselves like rewriting history. Like, oh yes, I was sitting down and I was writing the Great American Story, but in song form. But I think it is sort of like, I find a lot of the artists I talk to have that sort of intuitive nature about songwriting, that it's just there and you just sort of start doing it, and then it's not an overnight thing. Which is something that I'm interested in, because I've always been interested in artistry and always been interested in the people who create music, because I can't do that. Like, there are those people like us that go out, like, we try to sit down and write, and we try to, like, put a tune to it, and then we end up writing a song that already exists. Because I think artistry is something so ingrained in a person's human nature that sort of me asking the question, what was your motivation, sort of is counterintuitive, because it's just there.
Right. When you talk about writing a song that already exists, the thing is, like, there are probably 100 other songs that match whatever song you're thinking about. It's just maybe the way it's worded is different or something. But I also know that, when I'm thinking of myself as an artist, I'm not just thinking of myself as a musician, because not all of my thoughts can be translated into, a song. Right. Sometimes I'll go and, like, write a poem, or I'll write some prose, or if I'm really feeling it, like, I'll pick up a paintbrush and just paint something, or I don't know, there's a lot of different things that, I can do to express myself, and maybe I'm just lucky that way. But I also know that, artistry isn't just musicianship, and I think it would be a shame if we only considered, songwriting to be, like, the valuable thing. But I know, like, no one else thinks that too, but I think it's just placing the value where it belongs, and I think it belongs throughout all the arts.
Right, I completely agree. Yeah, I mean, so I did my thesis in college about music memoirs, so I kind of read Kim Gordon's memoir and Jerry Brownstein's memoir, and they sort of talk about that nature of artistry, that they want to be called artists because they don't consider themselves musicians, because this sort of term musician kind of it's interpreted as like you having this technical ability and you being highly proficient in the way you're performing, and it's about sort of skill set instead of just creative natures. But yeah, like I go back to that, and because I mean I wouldn't consider myself a songwriter, but I do consider myself a writer, because I mean that's sort of where I put my creative juices, like writing nonfiction, and really investing myself in like cultural critique and like media critique. So yeah, I definitely see your point there. So what do you think about the term musician versus artist? Do you prefer that? I mean, you are multifaceted in the way that you just talked about, writing prose and thinking in poems. Do you think being creative is that sort of being an artist more so than being a musician?
Oh man, I have no idea. And I think if you talked to me and I wasn't a music major for that one semester, I might have a better answer. But, I think I was perhaps foolish enough to kind of like pursue music formally in that 4-month span that I did, and that I think that changed how I kind of view musicianship, and it's kind of shown me how pretentious it is. But I make music, so yeah, I'm a musician. If you know 2 chords and you write songs on those 2 chords, yeah, you're a musician. I think skill sets aren't limited to what you know in that moment. I think there's always going to be room to grow in whatever art form you pursue. Cough, never stop improving, cough. So I think it's like, I don't know, like, you can call me an artist, you can call me a musician. I know that, maybe people don't always share that viewpoint, but I think it's really up to maybe you, cause you're the one who's getting something out of what I'm creating. So if it's the art that gets to you, that's a very ambiguous view, not you specifically. Yeah, or if it's like the music, whatever that means to you, then maybe I'm open up to interpretation.
Right, definitely. I mean, I kind of share that sort of. I mean, I played clarinet in high school, and I was very much of the mindset. I went to Redlands thinking I was going to be a music major and I was going to become a musicologist. And then
that's amazing.
Oh, you didn't know that about me? Yeah, I'm a total fan.
What a fun fact.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone who would be listening to this on an IndieBeat level would know that. I don't really put that out there, just because so this is what happened. So I went to Redlands as a music major. I was gonna play clarinet, and I talked with the clarinet department, and I was set to audition, set to take lessons there. And I went to the first day of rehearsals for the symphonic band, and I played it, and I was like, this is definitely not me anymore. Like, at that point, it was, like 5 months of not playing. So yeah, it wasn't for me, and I sort of fell out of that, but that was sort of, a year later, I started IndieBeat. So, I mean, it was like, my love for music was always there in some capacity, but it sort of evolved as much as I think how you're talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's always so, like, I think in any discipline, it's so useful to know what the classics are and to know, like, why the classics are, heated the way that they are, why they're seen as being so, maybe not necessarily great, but as fundamental. And I think it's really up to the maker to take that and do what they want with it, or just, like, stay along that path. And so, when I'm thinking about, like, my songwriting, like, I'll always get to points where I'm like, oh my god, the chord progression isn't complex enough. Like, I'm only using the circle of fifths. Like, I need to abandon that. That's, no, I'm happy writing the songs that I'm writing. And whoever decides that they want to criticize that is fine. But yeah, no, I think for me, like, my very brief classical training, like, messed with me a little bit, but I shook it off. It's all good.
You're just shaking it off. Yeah. But I think I agree, and I think that's sort of what, I use the term innovative a lot with artists that I believe in, because I think, but that goes back to that sort of classics way of thought. Like, innovation isn't just, like, completely, disregarding what came before. It's sort of like taking that in mind and, like, seeing how you're gonna play with it to make it new. So, people criticizing, I mean, rock critics, pop critics, like, any type of critic get a bad name because they do sort of point out areas that they don't tend to agree with. But I think most critics that do that aren't, focused on the way that something means. It's just, sort of something that's just like, I don't like this because it's not my taste in music. And that's sort of what I'm trying to get away from in the way that I write about music. Like, I don't write negative reviews on IndieBeat, but I mean, I'm a human being. Of course there's music that I don't like, but I mean, I don't want to, like, demean someone just because I don't like it. I know that there's some aesthetic purpose to it on another, in someone else's opinion. So I think that's definitely, like, yeah, people need to do themselves. Like, I mean, the blogosphere is wide enough that you'll find your audience somewhere, and music criticism should be about the way that you find value in the music, more so than, oh, this is a great song, listen to it. More so like, this is a great idea, I want to support it, I want to support this creative person. So that's sort of something I wanted to talk to you about, because I did know that part about you of not, of wanting to major in music, and then you sort of took a different realm. So sort of to step back from this artistry, if I'm correct, you've never performed in front of an audience.
I mean, not never. It's just very few and far between, and never my own music. So I guess the answer is no. I've never performed as me.
You've never performed original works, but you
Right.
have like you've done like open mics and stuff like that.
Yeah, I did a couple of Battle of the Bands in high school, and I'll perform for like a family party here and there. Or just like, I don't know, to me, jam sessions are always a performance in some way, shape, or form. And it's
Right.
like, I consider like my YouTube covers almost like a performance because, you know, they have to be.
Right. That's sort of what I meant. Like performing your original work in front of a direct audience. One of your tweets reads, "At everyone who asks why I don't play shows, I'm an Asian woman. So you really think the public is going to take me seriously?" Can you unpack that a little bit? What do you mean by that?
I think I'll start with like the gender and race aspect since that's what I know best.
Okay.
Well, I think I want to reference again that one critique of my music that said I sounded like a high school girl's diary. And then we think about high school girl's diary and the implications of that. And then we think about how high school girls are not taken seriously due to their emotionality. I think it's just critiques like that, you know I shouldn't let them affect me as an artist, but, you know, ultimately, like, these people are my listeners. And it's very hard to, I guess, shake that off. It's a little bit scary, and I don't know if I, like, read into it too much, and I don't want to invalidate myself in that way by thinking that I read into it too much. But there's also definitely, like, a strange dichotomy. Dichotomy is probably not even the right word, of just the way that, like, musicians operate or how listeners perceive the artists that they follow. I think that if a male wrote and performed all the songs that I've written and performed, they would get better reception than I ever probably would, because I'm expected to say all the things that I do say. So I think, you know, if I ever decided to take that out into, you know, the public eye, it would be very odd and different. Like, I sit here and I observe, you know, all the female artists that I like, and I just sit here and read, like, their criticisms and, you know, things like that. And, you know, maybe I shouldn't do that, but I also know that, you know, being aware of that is always going to be some type of useful.
Right, definitely. And I think you're right. I mean, like, if we just see the current alternative landscape, like, right now, Car Seat Headrest is getting a lot of, great reviews. And I mean, I think he's definitely in your school of thought musically.
I love him.
Sort of,
he's great.
Yeah, he's great. But I mean, I think he does have an easier time getting that recognition because he is a guy. He is out there and getting this critical acclaim. And I mean, some people might say, but what about Mitski? And she's getting a lot of acclaim right now. But I think it did take her a lot more time to get out there. She's had a career beforehand, and she's getting out there, and that's great. But I think she's worked harder than probably he has, just because of this sort of tension between gender and also this tension between race and ethnicity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think about, like, I don't know, I feel like the public would just think I'm, you know, whining all the time. And, you know, if a woman's too aggressive, she's just whiny. And I mean, I don't think my music's very aggressive at all. I think I'm very soft. But, and I really, like, and I know I shouldn't, but I fear that reaction a lot.
Right, and I think that's understandable. I mean, like, that's just out there in the media. Not to bring everything back to social media, but I guess I kind of am. That, I mean, like, that's sort of what's out there. Like, people put something out creatively and people get torn apart by it because people are so shitty on social media. I think that that's definitely a fear that's out there. And I think it's been out there beyond sort of right now. I mean, like, just to take it back to Kim Gordon's memoir, she talked about that, how as a woman performer, you sort of have to be, what the people expect you to be popular. If not, you're seen like not what they want to be. And she talks about Kathleen Hanna of, Bikini Kill, and she talks about all these women who sort of did what they wanted to do and they sort of got torn down because of it. So I think you have a point there. But, do you see yourself performing in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely like to. I think it would be fun to, be able to take my music out of the bedroom, because, I record all my music in my bedroom.
Right.
And I think it would be, I think it would be very rewarding, probably more for me than it would be anyone who is listening. But, I think about like all the, bands from the IE that I like go out and support, but they're all, conventionally attractive males. Like, how am I supposed to fit into that scene? Like, if I can't fit into the music scene in my own hometown, like, I don't really know how I'm expected to take it anywhere else.
It's something that's really, like, not, I mean, it shouldn't be this way, and it's a legitimate concern because it is that way. So, I mean, as a fan of your music, I would love to see the day that you step on stage and I think you would get a lot of great reception. And, yeah, I don't think your music is that aggressive, but I think it is strong. I think you do have a strong point of view. You have a strong temperament, and you're honest. Again, your music is real honest, and I think especially as these other artists in your sort of wheelhouse of songwriting are emerging right now, I think you're definitely on the up and up in terms of musical aesthetic. Julian Baker, Mitski, Car Seat Headrest, they're definitely, I think you have that in you to have an audience, because I think your music really touches on, it's sort of in the zeitgeist, but it's also a type of music that's, I find it classic.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really hoping to just like feed off of the energy that I'm feeling from other people right now, because I think it's helping. I mean, I'm never gonna, stop making music. I don't see myself stopping anytime soon or anytime in the future. So I really probably I'm gonna keep making the best of what I have, and right now what I have is, I am gaining a lot of support from people. And it's a very nice feeling, and I think it's just having to channel that into something where, I'm not as fearful about like the public's reaction. I mean, that might take some time, but I think I'm getting there.
Right. You're also, you're moving soon, aren't you?
Maybe, probably, yeah, I think so.
You're moving to Seattle, if I'm, maybe, probably, yeah.
Yes.
So do you think that it might be easier, considering the more, like, musically inclined scene that's sort of taking place there? Do you think that that might be easier to step out and perform?
I think it might be easier in its own respect, because, like, in a way, it's a lot more anonymous. I don't have to think about, like, the critique of, like, people who I know very well. Kind of, like, being out there. But at the same time, the only Seattle music that I know is, like, Seattle's very raunchy, like, DIY scene. Which is, like, not my definition of, like, DIY. It's a very special kind of DIY.
Right.
So I don't know, like, where I'll find myself fitting into that. I think it'll take a lot of, like, more networking and trying to find more artists who are up there in that area. But I'm excited for it. I think I'll enjoy the music scene up there.
Yeah, I think when I see your aesthetic on social media, or when I think that you would really fit in sort of that Pacific Northwest state of mind. And especially since you're moving up there to continue your schooling, right? Do you want to talk about that? Do you want to talk about how you sort of majored in something that, most people wouldn't consider an artist to major in?
Right. Oh man, I struggle with this a lot. Just like me as a person having such lofty professional goals, and also trying to like advance myself in the music sphere. I feel like it's not something that's like really talked about, but I also feel like it's becoming a lot more common.
Right.
Cause, with my career pathway, I don't think I'll ever be able to, like tour full time the way that a lot of artists do. I think it's going to be interesting, like finding that balance, but, yeah, I think you were talking about me being a biology major. And so I'm sitting here now with a degree in biology that I'm never going to use, and wanting to go into higher education and, researching the institution of higher education. And those two things are very important to me, and have almost nothing to do with like my artistry at all. Like, I'll never write songs about like how sad I was being a biology major, or how sad institutionalized racism in higher education makes me.
I mean, I would listen. I'm completely interested in that.
I mean, yeah, that's just like, it's a completely separate entity from like my songwriting and musical self. And it's interesting because I've never actually like thought about how separate those two entities were. Just because I don't think like my pathway in academia is necessarily like, I don't know, valued in whatever musical pursuits I'm pursuing at any given time.
I think that you're right that it's sort of, that's sort of our mindset now, but I think that it is changing, like you mentioned. I know, one of my best friend's brother is, I think he is, an engineer of sorts. Or maybe he's a scientist of sorts, I know. And he's doing his master's program in Virginia. And he's playing for, this indie rock band out of there. And he found a band and he's playing in it. So yeah, he's doing both, and he's trying to, I don't know if he's trying to make a career out of his artistry, but he is sort of trying to play to his different intellectual aspects, his creative aspects. So I think that is definitely changing.
Right, and it's like, the dudes from Power Bottom, went to college with my one friend, and then Adult Mom also Adult Mom has been in college throughout her entire, like, music career, so it's like, I know it's definitely, like, doable. And I know that, Mitski's first two albums were a product of her being in conservatory.
Right.
Yeah, but I also know that I think I read in an interview that Julian Baker, like, stopped school to, do what she's doing full time, and she's really good at doing what she's doing. I think it's just having to, like, find my limits and know, and I don't know, I just kind of, like, place priority on where I need to place priority at any given time. So, I mean, in a lot of ways, I don't think I'm, like, the typical artist, but I also don't think I'm so far-fetched and out there. Because there are a lot of musicians like me who are doing a really good job being the musicians they are.
Right, I agree completely. Yeah, you're not the typical artist, but you're not sort of out there, and I think that's a lot of the great people that we have in music today, especially in indie alternative music. They're not typical, but they are doing what they want to do, and they're really coming off as genuine people, and I think that's great. And I think it's fantastic that you have all these interests, and you're really just trying to figure things out. Just like going back to your music, I think that's what your music is about. It's just capturing a state of mind and really trying to figure things out.
Yes.
Alright. So I know you're writing new music, or you've written some new music, and you're headed into your first studio sessions, dude. Can you tell us a bit about that and what's coming up for you?
Yeah. Well, in the whole mess that is coordinating interstate moving, I have written a multitude of music, probably starting since January. And I would just like sit down and write for hours. Well, I've put up a couple demos of, some of those songs on my SoundCloud. But I'm excited to get the rest of my demos and not make them demos anymore. I'm very lucky to have a friend who's helping me out by introducing me to his friends and just seeing like where I can go from there. But so the title of the work is Distance Makes the Heart Grow Somber, and I haven't like finalized how many tracks are going to be on it or whatever. But I also know that all the songs have something to do one way or another about leaving or staying or just generally not knowing.
All right. That sounds like a great project. I mean, just with the 2 or 3 releases you put on your SoundCloud, it's sounding really, those demos sound really produced as is, like, they're really defined, and of course that new electric guitar sound. But I'm also excited of you, like, evolving a little bit more with, like, actual studio production. And I'm interested to see how that really affects your overall sound and, how your creative juices get flowing even further.
Yeah, I'm excited to have the input of other people in the production of my music, because up till now I've just made everything by myself with no input from almost anyone ever, for the past almost 10 years. That I've been making music out of my bedroom. And I think that's going to be very exciting. I've been teetering and tottering on the idea of doing full band recordings or whatever. Or just me and my guitar, the way that I always kind of have been. And I think I'll find a balance somewhere in there, but I think having other people's input, while, perhaps not necessary, will be very nice to have.
I'm excited for what's to come.
Thanks. I really appreciate all the support that you've given me throughout all the years. It's very nice to just have you as a friend, but also a supporter.
As your weird friend you've never really met, and having your first conversation through interview form.
That's true. This is our first conversation. I don't think we mentioned that earlier.
That was indeed my very first conversation with my friend Jess Mayuga, but I'm glad it happened that way because now I get to relive it every time I listen to this podcast. And with that, that's our show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening to the very first episode of Stage Presence. It really means a lot. I also want to thank Jess Mayuga for being an incredible first guest, and of course the Good Wives for letting us use Keep It Coming as our theme song. Remember to support indie artists by buying their music. Check out Jess's Bandcamp page for all of her releases. She's at jessicamayuga.bandcamp.com. That's jessicamayuga.bandcamp.com. Jess also has a hilarious Twitter feed where her wit gets amplified into this funny and raw stream of consciousness. She's at Aguyarn, that's Aguyarn. Find her everywhere else, including Spotify and Apple Music, by searching Jessica Mayuga. If you want to stay up to date on Stage Presence, be sure to follow IndieBeat on our social. We're at IndieBeat Music on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, and now Snapchat. That's at IndieBeat Music, IndieBeat Music. We're also at indiebeatmusic.com, so check us out there. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Now Jess is going to play us out with an acoustic version of her song, Bruised. We'll see you next time.
Alright, so this is Bruised. Trying to find the comfort it holds. Maybe I'm just too